I want these trainings to be super, super informal. I just know that so many people have a hard time with copy. I always hear people say it's so difficult to do. They're afraid of sounding salesy. They don't know what to write. They don't know how to write. And it doesn't have to be that difficult. So with these trainings, my hope is to help you through that, because I do think it's super important to write your own copy and to learn this skill. Because, and of course, I'm a little biased here, I think that copy is the most important thing that you can do in your business. Oh, sorry. And even though a lot of people focus on other things, I think copywriting is the most important, because if you think about it, copy is how you communicate with your audience. It's your voice. It's what shows them who you are and what you're about. Like, you can have a really beautiful site, but if the copy isn't working, the beautiful site isn't going to tell them anything extra other than you have good taste in design. And I think the goal is to show them your value and what you actually bring to the table. The way I like to think about it is like this. Think about like a love interest or a potential, love interest. If they're really, really handsome, you're like, oh, I bet this guy is like really awesome. You have this idea built up, and then you hear them speak and you're like, oh, why are they like that? Like the things that come out of their mouth don't really match the vision that you had of who they were. That really ruins your idea of them. But it can go the other way. If you have someone who might not be the most attractive, but they're super smart and super funny, you find them more attractive because you have a mental connection with them. So that's a good way to think about copy. If your site looks really good, but the copy sucks, people aren't going to see the value there. People are just going to cast you off as, nothing to offer. But if your website looks not the best, it isn't as sparkly and shiny, but it has amazing copy, really gives value, people will be like, okay, this person has a lot to say and I can overlook these design features. When they're both good, then of course it's even better. All right, so let's get started. Okay, 1 second. All right. You should be able to see my screen now. And it should be in presentation mode. Okay, today's training is 5-minute tips for writing clear, concise copy. The one thing I often hear is people talk about how they're super wordy and they have a hard time narrowing things down. So today I'm going to cover five tips, 5-minute tips for becoming more clear and more concise. I'm Violetta Potter of violettapotter.com, and I am a conversion strategist and copywriter. I've been writing for Maya Elios for quite a while, and I've been working with Joanna Wiebe of Copy Hackers in the Mastermind. And I love writing copy. Before this, I was an English teacher, so maybe that's why it's like this. Okay, copywriting is the bridge between you and your audience. If it reads poorly, you'll lose the connection. So why this matters? People create human-like connection to brands. And this is now more than ever. Before, people used to just see like, oh, it's an object or a thing. But now people are building actual connections and relationships with brands. And brand trust is crucial to consumers and to audiences. The other thing is that people these days are trusting brands less and less. So 20% of people trust brands, which means that it's super important that you establish a connection, that you build trust, and that you show your personality and your quirks, because it's so difficult to have a relationship with something you see as an object. But if you see their person, you see their humanity, you see what they're about, then it's easier to establish a connection and build trust. This is a huge disclaimer. So everything that I'm about to say, I totally believe in. But what I believe more than anything is that you should make choices that represent your brand, that work for your brand, and that work best for your audience. So before you implement anything, always consider, is this right for my brand? Is this right for my audience? Is that what my audience will speak to, or will that speak to them? And then make your decision. But what I'm about to show you, I believe, is applicable if you want to build a relatable brand and write copy that resonates with your audience. Quick tip number 1. So like I said, these are going to be quick. Use contractions. That should say no contractions. Sucks. No contractions. Wow. Contractions equals robot talk, which equals sounding impersonal. So forget words like you will, you are, and I am. Using contractions is the secret to sounding instantly more relatable. So it should be about you'll, your, and I'm. For example, so I'm going to sound like a robot real fast. Alicia does not like writing emails. She thinks they are a pain in the butt, so she does not write them until the last minute. And they are so boring that every time I read, I think I will stab my eyes out. And I wasn't even trying to sound robotic, but because of the way it's written, it just sounds so choppy and it sounds robotic and so impersonal. So a quick fix, changing those words and turning them into contractions. Alicia doesn't like writing emails. She thinks they're a pain in the butt, so she doesn't write them until the last minute. And they're so boring that every time I read, should say them, I think I'll stab my eyes out. So automatically, just that tiny little change changes how you sound dramatically. So this, if there's one thing that you're going to implement and implement quickly, make sure you always use contractions. Now, I know that if you're used to not using contractions, going back to edit them is a pain. So I have a bonus tip for you. Use the search feature. So it's really easy. You just search Command F, and I'll show you really quick. You use Command F, and then this pops up. If you click the 3 little dots, you'll end up with replace. So you'll search for things like I will. I have contractions in my example, and you replace it with I'll. Oops. In order to replace your contractions. And then you'll go through a list of a bunch of words. So you would click replace all, which I'm not going to do just for the sake of this presentation, but you get the point. So be sure to use contractions. Oh, quick tip number 2, F the rules. And when I say F the rules, I'm talking about grammar rules, of course. Grammar rules suck. There is no need to be all conventional. It's perfectly correct and conventional grammar doesn't sound relatable. So when you cut out these grammar rules, it'll help you shorten sentences. Here are some rules to break. End sentences with prepositions, things like above, below, beneath, with, next to, things like that. Start sentences with words like and, but, so, because, these conjunctions that people like to not use in the beginning of sentences. I know that in school, people said, or teachers drilled into your head that it's not appropriate to write that. I taught that too, but that kind of writing is different writing. That is academic writing. Here, we're writing to build a connection, and you're not trying to sound like a textbook to build a connection. Nobody connects to a textbook unless you're really academic and into that kind of thing. Use fragments strategically, kind of like I did here. So I know everybody talks about, you're supposed to have the subject and the verb, and you're supposed to have a complete sentence, but often for emphasis, you need to break this rule, because sometimes you just need to, make emphasis, 2, sound like you're talking, at least a little bit, and it's more relatable. Let's look at an example. Have you ever read a blog post with sentences so long you almost ran out of breath reading them, or felt like your brain was going to break down before you got to the end of the sentence? I did just then. Why do people do this? It is because of the old grammar rules they learned in school. Boring, I almost died and ran out of breath. So, the quick fix. Have you ever read a blog post with sentences so long you almost ran out of breath reading them? Or felt like your brain was going to break down before you got to the end of the sentence? So even with a question, you can just break it up and add the contractions. It sounds more natural. And why do people do this? Because rules. So here's that idea that I was mentioning of breaking up and using a fragment just for fun and style. It shows more of who you are. Quick tip number 3, get to the point. See, style again. Wordiness sucks. Okay, and I know this is something that a lot of people struggle with, being super wordy. So here's the thing. People are busy, so you should value their time. So don't use more words when less will do. Chop up your sentences and cut out extra words. It's easy to think that you have to write more to add more value. So it's easy to start adding filler words. But here's the thing, less words equals more value. Because if you can get your point across with less words, every single word that you do use has much more value. So think very carefully. Now, here's an important thing. I know a lot of you might say but this is what I struggle with. How do I fix this? I've had this problem for a long time. Well, the thing is that you're going to have to edit. Until you get used to writing this way, you're going to have to edit a little bit. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. So let's look at this example. What I mean by this is to use the least amount of words necessary in order to make your point in a shorter, more concise way so it takes less time to read. Oh my gosh, so much extra information. The best way to say this is use the least amount of words necessary to make your point concise. That's all you need to say. No need to add extra things and add extra qualifiers and extra phrases. Just cut out the extra. How did I do this? So the first thing you should do is highlight or bold the words that you need to make your point. Like, what are the words necessary? What I mean by this is, you see how I highlighted this? Use, the least amount of words to make your point concise. That's all people need to know. So what you can do is ask yourself, what do people really need to know here? What will people walk away with? And what people ultimately will walk away with in the sentence is that they need to use less words to make a concise point. So once I cut out all that extra thing, I end up with this sentence. So some people might wonder, well, what about this part where it takes less time to read? Isn't that important? I was like, well, if it's concise, doesn't it already take less time to read? So really think about, what is the value in adding this? If it doesn't have it, cut it out. This is kind of similar to that, but we're talking about cutting the crap. And these are words that I call filler, and they're fluff. And fluff sucks. Less words, remember, we talked about this. Less words equals more value. So consider if the words that you're using make your point clear. If they don't, cut them. Here are some words to cut. Really, very, just, basically, nice, good, bad. You see those really basic 1-cent words that you learned probably some in first, second, or third grade, that don't explain anything. Here's the thing though, I use them a lot, and I try to be conscious of my usage of them because that is the way that I talk. So I recommend that you do the same. So example, you know how there's some people who just write a lot? Those people are really very good at writing. It's actually so nice to read their emails because basically everything they say is valuable. So let's tear this apart. You know how there's some people who just write a lot? So do they just write or do they actually write? What does just actually mean here? This word sounds like you're trying to minimize what comes after. For example, I'm just a mom. Oh, is that all? You're just a mom? Like, the word just doesn't add extra value. It actually takes away the value that you're trying to give. Those people are really very good at writing. Really very good. How good are they? Do you really know? Does this sentence show how good they are or what makes them good? It doesn't really qualify their skill of writing. It's actually so nice to read their emails because basically everything they say is valuable. Well, is it nice or is it not nice? Nice? Was it nice to read, or did you enjoy reading it? What does it mean? How do these readers actually feel, at least the reader in this sentence? Is that what they say? Is what they say valuable or not? Pick one. Is it valuable or is it not valuable? Basically, is what I'm referring to in this phrase. So how we would fix it. You know how there's some people who write a lot? Those people are often excellent writers. It's enjoyable to read their emails because everything they say is valuable. See, it just makes it more concise. It cuts out the extra. You're more clear in what they're saying, in what you're saying. So how to do this? Oh, sorry. Okay. Last tip. Have some balls and be direct. Ugh, this one really irks me. Passive voice. When you use passive voice, it focuses on the action of the sentence instead of focusing on who or what is performing the sentence. And it makes the performer of the action unclear. I know this one's a little dense, but it's super important. It sounds like you're trying to dodge responsibility, so it sounds distant. For example, when somebody says, your email will be answered in 10 minutes. Your email will be answered by whom? Who is answering my email? I'm trying to talk to you and you're telling me your email will be answered. Speak to me like a real person. An example, passive voice has been used for centuries. Confusing, vague, and wordy is what passive voice can be described as. Passive voice is best to be avoided. So let's tear this down a little. Passive voice has been used for centuries. Who? By who? Who has used passive voice? Confusing, vague, and wordy is what passive voice can be described as. What's the emphasis here? What is the point of the sentence? Is it about the descriptors, or is it that people describe it as something? Passive voice is best to be avoided. Again, by whom? And who talks like this? Are you Yoda? So let's fix these. Writers have used passive voice for centuries. Passive voice can be confusing, vague, and wordy. It's best to avoid passive voice. Okay, so now this, like I said, today's training was going to be very, very basic and just focus on 5 little tips that you can incorporate today to instantly improve your copy. If you have any questions, by all means, put those in the chat. If you have questions about what I covered here, ask away. If you have other questions related to copy that I didn't cover here, by all means, ask away. I'm here to answer your questions. So if you have any, feel free to ask them. Put them right in the chat and I will get to them quickly. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed this very easy, light training. Copy is super, super important for, okay. I hope you enjoyed this really easy and light training. Copy is super, super, super important for your business. It's super important to build a connection, to build that trust that you need with your audience. So it's important that you work hard at making it better because copy is not going to go away. And it's super unreasonable to shell out tons of money to a copywriter for them to write everything for you. So yeah, if you have any ideas for what I should cover in my next training, by all means, let me know. Talk later.